Hello everyone, today I'll be doing something a little bit differently. This list will only be about my subjective opinion on 10 piano concertos that I've learned. So I've learned these pieces over several years. I will also tell you when I've learned them, and I'll just tell you my experiences and if I like them or not. I like all of these pieces, maybe for exception of one or two. This won't be really a comparison or difficulty rating or anything like that. It will just be my thoughts and my experiences with these concertos. So I'll start from my least favorite and then work my way up. So in number 10 we have the Shostakovich Piano Concerto number 1, Opus 35. This is a very satirical piece, typical in the style of neoclassicism like Shostakovich, Prokofiev, etc. And it's actually written for piano and trumpet. So yeah, these are piano concertos, but this concerto in particular also features a very prominent trumpet part. And you actually have to learn or at least know what the trumpet is doing, because you're going to be playing almost like a duo with the trumpet. So you better know exactly what trumpet is doing in this concerto. I had to learn this piece last year in a bit of a rush, so maybe that explains why I didn't really have time to appreciate this piece fully, but I'm just not a huge fan of the structure of the piece, and the melodies kind of left me, wanting for more, and I wasn't really satisfied with the melodies of this piece. Still a good concerto to learn if you like, the neoclassical movement, and if you don't want to start with a Prokofiev or from different composers, you can start with Shostakovich number 1. I will also say that it's not that difficult to learn, and it didn't take me that long to learn the notes. So even though, well, I believe it was it was a four movement concerto, it's not that difficult to learn it, and not that difficult to read either. So it's it's an affordable piano concerto, let's say like this. Next we have the Hungarian Fantasy S123, and I have learned this piece probably in 2006 or 2007, and the only thing I remember from it, it's very virtuoso, of course, it's Liszt, and it's based on the Hungarian Rhapsody number 14. So this isn't really a piano concerto, it's more like a orchestral work with piano, but of course there is a prominent piano solo part, but it's just not a piano concerto, there is this difference between the two. Listening to recordings, it all came back to me, but I just didn't like the piece that much at the time. Maybe now I'm a different person and I can appreciate it more, but I think it was just too much virtuoso parts mixed with melodies that didn't really attract my ears. I think this one's also not that difficult to learn, so you can probably learn it as one of your first Liszt orchestral works if you don't want to start with a piano concerto, and I think it's nowhere near the difficulty of those concertos. Then we have Beethoven Piano Concerto number 1, Opus 15 in C major, and I must have learned this piece around 2006. It's a beautiful concerto. I actually played it again just a couple of years ago, and I completely got a new view on it. I think when I learned the piece for the first time, I couldn't really appreciate the beauty of it, but learning it again or playing it again, I completely was shocked of how good it was. And I think even though it's the number 3 on this list, it really doesn't represent, because all the other pieces or concertos that are coming later will just be that I like them even more. But it doesn't really work that way, guys. Yeah, so it's not a comparison in this list. I just love this concerto. It sounds so good and so simple, but not simple to play at all. Yeah, there are actually, I believe, 3 cadenzas written for the first movement, and people also compose their own cadenzas. If you want to have something to laugh at, you should go on YouTube and look for Glenn Gould's own cadenza for this concerto. I think it's very funny and absolutely crazy. I'm not sure it really fits the piece. And when I learned it the first time, I played the second cadenza, I believe. And then when I learned it again, I chose the third one because it's just way more powerful. Then we have the Piano Concerto number 5 by also Beethoven. I don't think I have to explain the fifth concerto. People are usually most aware of the fifth, and then probably the fourth and probably the third then. So I think most people don't really professionals, of course, they know all 5, but usually people are more focused on the fifth one. And yeah, it's majestic, it's powerful, etc. It's an amazing concerto. I learned it 2015 or 2016, I'm unsure when, but yeah, I just remember that it was a lot of work to get through it. It's quite a long piece, even though the Piano Concerto number 1 is also very long, if I remember correctly. Just love this piece. For me, the highlight or the favorite is the second movement. I think it's one of the best second movements that there is, and just playing it is absolute joy. Next up, we have the Piano Concerto number 1 by Tchaikovsky. And this is an iconic piece, not only the opening chords, I hope, but the rest of the concerto too. And it was actually heavily criticized by Nikolai Rubinstein, one of his friends, when he first released it, so he had to revise it multiple times. So the version that we play is actually the third version. The first movement is extremely long, that takes so long to read and to learn. It's really really tough, and a lot of material you have to chew through, to get it to work. Second movement is stunning, I think underrated, and of course third movement con fuoco is just absolute party. Then we have Mozart's Piano Concerto number 20 in D minor, and this is one of only 2 minor key piano concertos from Mozart. So it's very different than the Mozart concertos usually. Very, very different if you think like Jeune Concerto or Concerto number 12, This is a completely different kind of deal. Got this very dramatic, very dark character. Second movement is absolutely beautiful. Again, I love it. And Beethoven wrote cadenzas for this concerto, and they're often performed. I think I also learned the Beethoven cadenza, and this was around 2011 when I learned this. So yeah, it must have been the Beethoven cadenza. I think that's what people usually go for. Then we have the Chopin Piano Concerto number 2, Opus 21, which I learned 2016, which was written before the first concerto. So this is similar like Beethoven's second concerto and Beethoven's first concerto. This is a similar kind of deal where the second concerto of Chopin was written before the first, but just the numbering changed, the order changed. This is the piece I use in my intros of my videos, so if you wonder where does that piece come from, where does the melody come from, it's the second movement of the second piano concerto by Chopin. I learned this piano concerto after I learned the first one, and I was surprised to see that it's almost like a copy. Well, not really a copy, but so many elements are just very, very similar that it feels like it's the same concerto like the first, but written a bit differently. So I was very surprised to see that in many ways it's the same concerto. Then Prokofiev Piano Concerto number 2. This is a concerto I've learned in 2020. This was during lockdown. I've learned a bunch of big pieces in that time because I had a lot of time and not much to do, so I just learned it in that year. I think it must have been like the winter of 2020. And yeah, another neoclassical work, but this one is completely crazy, difficult. I love the first movement. I love the cadenza on the first movement. The second movement is actually what drew me to learn it in the first place, because I have heard the second movement quite often, and I thought I would start it as a kind of technical exercise to see if I can play the whole thing without getting tired, etc. And then I just decided to learn the concerto, and it's a really, really tough concerto. I should have put a lot more time into it if I wanted the last movements to be really up to par. But yeah, it's very original, very creative. I love the themes, and yeah, just the cadenza is probably the highlight for me in the first movement. Chopin Piano Concerto number 1, Opus 11 is the next concerto. I learned this one 2015. It's one of my favorites. I think just of all pieces, not even piano concertos. It's just beautiful, and it's so lyrical, poetic, but also just nice to play. It's always the feeling with me when I play Chopin, who was just so good at writing for the pianist hands that it just feels very natural and very comfortable to play. Like every arpeggio just makes sense, and even the very difficult third movement, where you have sometimes the thumb and the second finger and the pinky doing melodies, a bit more technically challenging. Even then, it still feels natural. So I think the ability of Chopin to write these things and make them sound so good, but also making them feel really good in the hand, is just top notch, and yeah, very, very well thought out, and just amazing concerto. And then my favorite piano concertos of the piano concertos that I've learned is Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto number 3. Actually, one of the most viewed videos or shorts on my channel is from the third concerto, where I was playing with a second piano, and I was playing the ossia part in the third movement with the double notes. So I learned this piece 2019, and it took me quite a while to chew through the whole texture of the piece, the whole material. There is just so much, and it's very technically demanding, of course, but it's also very profound. And I think people underappreciate the second movement. I just love it, and yeah, if you're interested, you should definitely learn it. Which piano concerto have you learned and is your favorite? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.